Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Sports Minority Report. Today we're going to be focusing on the UFL. It's the first of what started off as a two-part series, and I'm going to make it into a three-part series because more information's come out recently. But the first part, I'm just going to pull the curtains back on the UFL and reparse some of the information that's out there in a way that you probably hadn't considered. It's going to shake up your understanding of the league going into the 2026 season. Before we get started today, I want to go ahead and admit something right up at the start. Several times in this video, I call Louisville Louisville. This is because I live right outside of Louisville, Texas. And that's burned itself into my skull over the last 20 years. I do know that Louisville, Kentucky is pronounced Louisville, but you're going to hear that mistake every once in a while. I apologize in advance. With that said, let's take a look back at the 2025 locations of the United Football League's teams. You've got the San Antonio Brahmas, the Houston Roughnecks, the Arlington Renegades, the Birmingham Stallions, the Memphis Showboats, the St. Louis Battlehawks, the Michigan Panthers, and the DC Defenders. You can look at this map and see that the effort by the league was to try and keep the footprint tight to reduce travel. I think that was a decent plan. On July 22nd, UFL's news hub Mark Perry dropped a bombshell report. Exclusive! 4 USFL franchises are moving! According to multiple league sources, 4 teams are on the chopping block. And in their place, effectively entirely new franchises. Most notably, all of the remaining USFL branded teams are allegedly being wiped off the map. Let's break it down. Mark Perry reports that front office staff in some markets have already been let go for not hitting performance metrics. The teams getting axed: Michigan Panthers, the Memphis Showboats, Houston Roughnecks, which to be honest was an XFL branded team, and the Birmingham Stallions. Yep, the 3-time champs. Now you might be thinking, wait, the Stallions? They've dominated the league, and yeah, they're apparently getting cut too. The day after Perry's report dropped, the league issued a one-line press release. The league office is in the planning stages for the next season and beyond. At this point, we have nothing to report on any unauthorized speculation. Unauthorized speculation. That's pretty much, that should be the name of my show. Are you saying that someone high up at the UFL has to give fans permission to speculate on whether or not their teams will be around next year? Or terminated employees are somehow not allowed to talk about what they see happening to the league? It just is, it makes my head hurt. More to the point, that denial doesn't deny any of that. And to me sounds like a corporate CEO proclaiming from on high, "Shut your traps, UFL fans. We'll give you the markets we want to give you." Pro Football reporter Mark Mitchell tweeted, "Had 2 league sources up the ladder at Fox and Redbird inform me that nothing had been finalized for the 2026 season. The whole situation has been described as fluid. The initial plan was to add 2 new teams in 2026, but due to struggling markets and bad relationships with venues, relocation is now on the table." So let's go back to Mark Perry, who offered some context and maybe some cold hard truths about each of the 4 teams in the chopping block. Here are some snippets of his thoughts. Now, these are all Mr. Perry's. The Memphis Showboats. 1. Memphis is a terrible sports town despite renovations to the stadium. 2. Houston Roughnecks. Had a heartbeat in the XFL back in 2020, but never really regained that spark. 3. The Birmingham Stallions. The Stallions, with 4 straight championship appearances and a three-peat. If that can't get fans into the stands in Birmingham, nothing will. The brand new Protective Stadium, home of the Stallions, was always a topic of complaint from UFL leaders. The venue was not that good. Weather could force fans to leave the stadium, as there was no cover from rain. The seating, club amenities, you name it, it was a problem. 4. Michigan Panthers. Michigan was the only franchise to have an uptick in attendance and interest for the 2025 season. The biggest issue for the team was not the play, the ticket sales, or the fans. It was Ford Field. It cost too much per game to play there, and the UFL couldn't find another suitable home. So, where's the league looking next? Here's what he had to say. 1. Columbus, Ohio. 2,000-seat historic Cruise Stadium could serve as a venue for a UFL team. The former MLS stadium has no full-time tenant now, making it affordable. Audi Field, an MLS stadium, is the second best venue in the UFL. Adding another MLS stadium where the team won't have to compete for field time would be great. Columbus can share the fan bases with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. 2. Florida, either Orlando or Tampa Bay. Camping World Stadium, 60,000 capacity in Orlando, would see spring football return, or Raymond James Stadium, 69,000 capacity in Tampa. Now, I want to come back to this in a bit because I think Perry may be wrong on the stadium situations in Orlando and Tampa. I think the league is leaning towards probably Orlando and trying to get into their soccer stadium. But that's just me speculating. Number 3, Boise, Ohio. Idaho. Boise may be a smaller market, but has a rabid football fan base. No NFL, NBA, or MLB nearby. A UFL franchise here would face none of the saturation or sports burnout issues of bigger cities. Could also draw interest from neighboring states, fans in eastern Washington, Idaho, Montana, etc., who have no home pro team. Plus, the Smurf turf is iconic. Boise could be what we thought Birmingham would have been, a smaller city, but with a rabid fan base. Boise State's athletic director did say the UFL won't be coming in 2026, but also heavily hinted by not commenting that future seasons are probably still in play. Number 4, Louisville, Kentucky. L&N Federal Credit Union Stadium, the University of Louisville's football stadium, 60,000 capacity, or Lynn Family Stadium, 11,700 capacity, could be possible locations in Louisville. The Louisville City FC draws among the largest crowds in minor league soccer. The UFL would fit right in. Okay, that's a lot to take in, but believe it or not, there's still more because all of this ties into something bigger. The merged league planned on hitting their numbers and basically surfing smooth waters through last season, and then to add 2 more teams for the 2026 season, and maybe 2 more a season or so after that. Then reality arrived and financially punched them in the mouth, as it does every feeder league for the NFL in the spring, and that plan went out the window. Again, per Mitchell, the continued struggles of existing team markets and the league's souring relationship with their venue partners has had them shift focus to exploring relocation options. So what did the UFL Brain Trust do? They went looking for someone with deep pockets, someone willing to lose money in the short term to chase a long-term spring football vision. And guess what? They found him. But before we dive into who that is and what his money means to the league's future, we need to zoom out and remind ourselves, what exactly is the UFL? Because that really needs to be understood. Let's rewind. The new XFL and new USFL were not equals at all. The new XFL and the new USFL were apples and oranges. The XFL may have been somewhat struggling, but they had 8 real markets, each with a physical team, coaches, fans in the seats, and advertising campaigns that launched those teams. The USFL, not so much. 8 teams in name, but initially only one real hub, Birmingham. The rest were ghost franchises playing in a shared stadium. It very much appeared that Fox, with their USFL product, didn't care about crowds. They just wanted football on the TV in the spring. The UFL was founded when The Rock and his ex-wife and their investors in the new Redbird XFL, Redbird Capital, talked to the co-owners of the new USFL, Fox, into a merger. Now, conceptually, I look at that and I think Fox surrounded their assets, the valuable USFL brands, to The Rock to retain the ability to broadcast the merged league's games. The Rock, his ex at Redbird Capital Group, basically assumed the rights to the teams. Now, that isn't on a press release, but I think conceptually that's the gist of what each party wanted out of the merger. Fox wanted games to broadcast. The Rock and Company wanted less competition in the spring, allowing them to ride out the rough years in theory with TV revenue until they could sell franchises. I think that's pretty much dead on. What about ESPN? Let's not forget ESPN was broadcasting XFL games, and would you know it, turns out ESPN now owns a stake in the UFL too. Which brings up the biggest twist of all. Enter Mike Repole, the billionaire shot caller. On April 31st, Alex Schifter reported that the UFL added a new major investor, Mike Repole. Now, Repole is the co-founder of Vitamin Water and Body Armor. He's worth $1.6 billion with a B dollars. He is a major booster for St. John's. Repole apparently made a major investment into the UFL, and now will, in quotes, lead the league's business operations. That's a pretty broad statement. The league insists Repole's investment was not a bailout, but you be the judge. What exactly does his title mean? Well, if you look at the headlines, it apparently means he's calling the shots now. How much of the league do you think he has to own to be calling the shots? Repole told Front Office Sports one of his first moves would be to look at where all of the games are being played and possibly move them, including out of football stadiums. So there you go, UFL fans. That is Repole, the new face of the the UFL. It appears to be his call to merge or to contract Houston, Memphis, Detroit, and Birmingham. That's collectively DMA's number 6, 51, 14, and 45. Interestingly enough, ESPN, i.e. Disney, and Qatar's sovereign wealth fund were revealed in that article to have previously undisclosed stakes in the league. And the league made a point to point out that Repole is not the major investor in this league. These kinds of points are huge red flags to me, and kind of the basic and are the basis of the kind of unauthorized speculation that I do here. If Repole is the minority owner, then why is just one of many minority owners? Then why is he calling the shots? Why is he folding half the league? Why are they going along with that? Who is the majority owner in the league? So, who actually owns the UFL? Why would they defer to him for decision making? He's frankly a sports league novice. I think the answer likely is dictated by the ownership percentages. I've been kind of speculating on this, and I think I've come up with an answer that makes sense. Let's say the majority owners, say if it's not Repole, that they are the media partners. I can envision a scenario where Fox and ESPN each own 25.5% of the league, giving them a combined controlling interest of 51%. That makes sense, right? They don't really want to run the league. They just care about the content. They partner on sports all the time. This kind of setup gives them the control they want. It is not uncommon for them to be equal partners in things. So I think that makes a lot of sense. They own 51%, so they can control the media. They also can choose whoever they want on the minority portion to run the league. They already have TV deals reportedly lasting for another 2 years with the league. So who owns the remaining 49%? This is my guess. Repole owns 25%. Redbird Capital owns 13%. Qatar's sovereign wealth fund owns 10%. And The Rock and Danny Garcia? Maybe 1%, if even that. Yes, I believe The Rock and Danny have cashed out. They may have held on just enough equity to snag a future franchise each down the line if the league survives. David Dixon, the brain behind the original USFL, also was not nearly as wealthy as the other owners. He pocketed the rights for a USFL team as his pay, which I think he sold for about $5 million back in the day, and it became the Houston Gamblers. So this is not without precedence. And honestly, it's smart. The Rock is not Redbird Capital or Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund rich. and I doubt his ex-wife is either. Why bleed movie money when someone else can? I view The Rock's involvement as, one, done to heroically provide a league for players not good enough for the NFL to continue chasing that dream, and two, to help Redbird Capital to get the league from McMahon. Now, I'm miscategorizing this second point a little bit. I don't really want to argue about it because it's not really important. To me, it doesn't make sense long term for The Rock to be burning his money like this. And if the league makes it, Dany Garcia gets what she might have desired in the deal, the opportunity to look competent in a big business deal. Apologies if I'm being inaccurate or dismissive to Miss Garcia, but I think generally conceptually that's probably pretty right. Neither seems to have the motivation to bleed out their wealth forever on this altar to the football gods. Likewise, Redbird Capital would look at this and view it as there are now 3 major investors involved, which dramatically increases the odds this thing will survive long term. Could I see them shedding some shares in the short term in return for maybe the ability to buy out the TV partners at a future reasonable cost? Sure. But is a private individual like Repole going to want Redbird or Cutter teaming up and outvoting them? No way. So he'd have to be able to outvote them. So I'm speculating Redbird may own 13%, Cutter may own 10%, with The Rock and Dany Garcia's. That is still only 24% versus Repole's 25%. What I'm saying is this screams at me that Repole is running teams with ESPN and Fox's blessing over Redbird or Cutter, or The Rock and his ex. What does that mean? Hold on to your hats, this is huge. It means that there are 5 entities that could potentially afford to spend several $100 million on this league, if they choose. Now just let that set in. This is the best funded spring football league I think I've ever seen. If Repole runs it right, this league will absolutely survive. It has too much going for it not to. Now, if Repole runs it wrong, one or more of the 3 non-broadcast partners might sell out. I can see a scenario where the losses get too large and the network partners sour the milk and it all collapses. Or the network partners get pushed out or push out Repole and buy out the investors. But in the short term, I think there's quietly been a changing of the guard. Repole in charge. Is this a good or a bad thing? Is Repole going to run the league well, or will he run it into the ground? My initial thoughts are, with no disrespect for such an accomplished businessman, that the latter is more likely. Repole was quoted saying several things that are huge red flags to me that suggest that, like many others, he's learned the wrong lessons from past spring leagues. He comes off as arrogant as heck and as tin-eared as you can get. Listen to this, Jen. I think today is the first day of the United Football League. Oh, really? Keep in mind he's making that statement right after the rumor mill has said that half of the league's teams are being contracted, and the league hasn't bothered to soften this blow with fans at all. He may as well have said, I think today is the first day of the United Football League, now that we've run off all of those crappy USFL fans who are weighing us down. Half of the spring football fans of this league are ready to turn on this league. That is already a sliver of the total spring audience. Good luck getting ratings in that scenario. And if you don't get ratings, your TV partners will make it hard on you. 2, he doesn't view the UFL as pro football. He made it a point to say, we're not looking to compete with the NFL. That is a beginner's move. That is one of the dumbest things you can tell your fans. Even if it's true, you don't ever say that. That doesn't protect your fans who view your league as a farm league. It only drives away fans looking for a pro football alternative to the NFL. It says you're a small-time thinker and that your league is, quoting a very famous person, small potatoes. You don't have to compete with the NFL on stars to be pro football. You need to get your head straight on that. Only 2% of college players go to play in the NFL. You know, if you're the USFL or the UFL or whatever you want to be in spring football, you may be taking an additional 1%. That's still in the top 97% of college football players. It's still pro football. You're running a professional football league. You need to position yourself like one. Nobody cares about minor league football. Look in Wikipedia at how many minor league football leagues have failed. It is staggering. You don't need to challenge the NFL directly, chasing every star like the original USFL did, but you do need to choose your moments. Number 3, Repole has a soccer-specific stadium obsession. I cannot tell you how many times I've run into this. I've run into this over the last 30 years talking about, spring football with people. There's always a group of those guys who are just like, oh, you got to play it in a soccer stadium. It's got to be in a soccer stadium. They're all great. That's not true, okay? It's very much an oversimplification. Yes, certain soccer-specific stadiums are exceptional candidates to host a UFL or USFL team, but not all of them. I don't know that Repole sees the difference yet, and that's kind of a little bit scary. This is Repole talking about his logic. I think that partnering up with some of these MLS teams is going to be very, very exciting, Repole said. When we have 12,000 fans in a 60,000 capacity stadium, it looks like a COVID game. When you have 12,000 fans in a 15,000 capacity stadium, you're basically sold out. That, sounds great, but then you need to apply reality to that. Start with the fact that soccer teams would prefer not to share a stadium with a spring football team because football games tear up their turf. This whole idea that 90% of what is wrong with spring football can be fixed by playing in soccer-specific stadiums is more conventional wisdom of spring football fans that is flat out wrong. And take the Boston Breakers of the original USFL. They played in a 20,000 seat stadium, Nickerson Field. Perfect situation, right? Soccer-specific stadium fans? It may have been the league's most exciting team. They had a tendency to come back from behind and win games. They followed the league's salary budget with a fair amount of discipline and had a good team with a chance to beat any opponent any week. But their home stadium had a hard cap of 20,000. They needed to pull like 18,000 on average to not lose money. Their stadium didn't allow that. It was a hard cap on the potential attendance versus better opponents. So they went out of business, selling the franchise. You can't assume you'll always get 12,000 in a 15,000 seat stadium. That just isn't how spring football works. If you play in a 15,000 seat stadium, you'll have long jags for your teams there drawing 7,000 to 9,000 per game. That will just burn your money. To imagine you'll consistently pull 12K is just living in a fantasy world. Every time your teams fail to meet your expectations, you're losing more money than you planned on losing. What happens when your quarterback goes down? In a tiny stadium, your season and your team are toast. So Repole's plan, what he wants. This reported contraction and replacement is clearly Repole's plan. Let me put it into focus for you after applying the lens of reality again. Start by contracting the 3 remaining USFL teams, killing all goodwill you had with any fans of the USFL. You're going to start by effectively telling USFL fans you have no intention of owning a USFL team anytime soon. Now, as the UFL owns the right to all USFL teams, you are essentially guaranteeing half your fan base that their teams are not coming back in their lifetimes. You think that's not flipping them the bird? You're going to replace them with teams in Columbus, Ohio, Orlando, Florida, Louisville, Kentucky, and Boise, Idaho, if Boise State agrees. So let's break that down. To put a team in Columbus at historic Columbus Crew Stadium, capacity 20,000. It's DMA number 35 out of 210. Now, I've long thought that Columbus is a perfect town for spring football, and is even more so now that you have a decent stadium sitting empty waiting for them. But it's a lot less so if Repole implodes the Michigan Panthers right next door. Michigan would literally be their perfect rivals. With the Panthers, I think you could see 15,000 to 18,000 fans per game in Ohio, and maybe your number 2 team in the league in attendance. But no Panthers, and I think Columbus is distrustful, and you might be looking at half those numbers. Put a team in Orlando playing at Inter & Co Stadium, capacity 25,500. DMA fit number 15 out of 210. I'd mentioned that I think that they're focused more on trying to get them into soccer stadiums, so it makes more sense for them to put an Orlando franchise into Inter & Co Stadium. Orlando, however, has proven to be a Memphis-level fan support market, i.e. not very supportive, even though they are in football-crazy Florida. Playing in a 25,000-seat stadium will help because they will only draw 8 to 14,000 fans, basically in line with the average UFL team. But will the soccer club let you play there? I suspect these MLS stadiums are going to charge a premium to the UFL as football tears up their fields. This MLS season starts in February. The UFL starts in March. So early in the season, it would tear up their turf and be torn up for the large chunk of their season. I think there's a pretty good chance you might not get in at what you feel like is a fair price for that stadium. You might be back out looking at Camping World Stadium, which is pretty clearly not what Repole wants. He doesn't want small fan bases playing in big, huge stadiums. Number 3 team, probably Louisville in Lynn Family Stadium, capacity 11,700. DMA number 49 out of 210. To me, this stadium is way too small. This will cost you a lot of money. But you can see it in Repole's comments that that's probably what he's looking at in Louisville. He's very myopic about soccer stadiums. He seems to really want this. Number 4, the plan is to beg and plead with Boise State to get a team into Albertson Stadium, capacity 36,000 for the 2026 season. It's DMA number 98 out of 210. The idea is this would be like his home run, another St. Louis. I think this is an unlikely proposition for 3 very basic reasons. They're regionally isolated, they are a small market, and their fans may not be as rabid as advertised. Now, do I think they would draw well? Sure, yeah. But I think 18 to 21,000 is the likely ballpark, not 35K. Is that worth flying out to Boise? Is Boise the media market worth that? I think you would do just as well to play in tiny Omaha. Wait, what's that? Omaha's a bigger market with the number 73 DMA? I can hear Boise fans cursing me, saying the fans are going to rush in from nearby markets. And maybe that's true, but I think it's unlikely early on, given the progression of spring football teams. To me, this plan is ill-conceived. It shows a fair bit of ignorance to this particular business. Now, killing the USFL legacy will hurt a lot more than you think. I'm going to start out by saying that, in my opinion, not seeing this in glowing neon is pretty freaking crazy to me. What portion of the UFL media viewership was from historic USFL cities? Roughly 40 to 45% of it. What portion was in the relatively new brand cities of the XFL? 20 to 25% of it. Given what we know about the markets, how much would Louisville and Columbus add? Maybe 5 to 7% each? Boise and Idaho have really not shown interest in UFL spring football. It seems like you're looking at a substantial viewership downturn with this plan. This concept seems really stupid to me, so forgive me if I hurt some feelings as I roll through this. I never like hurting people's feelings, but it would be hard to make points, not to make points that hurt here. I think Repole is in some ways focusing on attendance in the wrong way. Yes, they rolled out USFL cities and communities that were not prepared to support roaming USFL teams with strong marketing in 2024 or 25. The marketing sucked, and you were establishing a brand new team. It should have been treated that way. Yes, most USFL cities did poorly versus the returning XFL markets that had the initial strong push of marketing to create their teams. Yes, you should stop playing in cities where you can't draw. Sure, that's fine. But the mistake Repole seems to be making is using that to fuel the assumption that all USFL markets are non-optimal candidates because they're probably more expensive to get into. Let's start with something harder to see. Birmingham is a winning team on the field. Now, that has nothing to do with support or lack thereof that Birmingham fans have shown for the team, but it does matter to football fans and specifically USFL fans. Fans of the USFL already feel like you show them no respect. To pull the plug on that team and replace them with Orlando, a team that's likely about to draw the same dang numbers? Man, come on. Likewise, Panther fans will feel resentment against the UFL, and that could skunk the Columbus expansion. If Columbus is just drawing the same number of fans that Michigan drew, it'll make Repole look very, very foolish to the XFL fan and could cost the league credibility and viewership. Houston is not a failed market. It proved in XFL Year 1 that it has appeared to Arlington, and at 40,000 their stadium is not obnoxiously large if the league runs the team sensibly. The league skunked the team the last few years by not making sensible calls and tying that team to the community. But there is a lot of visible evidence that would suggest the situation in Houston was far, far worse than the reported numbers would suggest. Am I saying Houston's atrocious numbers last year were actually padded? They could very well have been. Were they only drawing 1,000 people to some games? Videos floating out there on game days in 2025 are pretty hard to stomach. If that is the case, it may take more than a partial offseason to properly resurrect that market. Now, I think Houston is immensely fixable, but not in an abbreviated offseason. That said, killing it and putting a team into too small of a stadium in Louisville is effectively cementing you will have a 2025 Houston level attendance team in that slot. That's just a dumb idea. Memphis is the only team every USFL or XFL fan gives the league a total pass to implode. They cannot draw fans, and Fred Smith is gone. Giving that slot to Boise or another new market makes sense to everyone. But if you kill these franchises, you're alienating every USFL fan that's stuck through this league through the merger. Your plan calls to replace them with maybe equally performing markets, and look like a fool if attendance and viewership dips league-wide, which is pretty likely. So I've applied reality to the Repole plan and then mapped it out. You can see the problems here on this map. I've listed the 4 teams that are scheduled to return: San Antonio, Arlington, St. Louis, and DC. I've also listed Birmingham because Birmingham seems like the cheapest team that they could possibly bring back. So they're sort of on the map as a maybe. Now, why is Birmingham on the map as a maybe? Because of this red light you see over here in Idaho. Boise is not on board with bringing on a team this year, and that has totally screwed up the Repole plan. Now, Repole has to look at it and say, well, I've got a green light with Columbus, so I can put a team there, but when I look at Louisville and Orlando, and I'm not, I hadn't had a few scotches, they have problems, and they may not be the best expansion franchises for this moment. I've also dropped this into a spreadsheet so you can see the Repole plan in action. Now, Repole is looking at this, and he's got St. Louis, DC, Arlington, and San Antonio coming back. He's got Columbus that he's promised to launch. And to get a balanced schedule, he needs one more team. Now, I think that the odds are it's either Birmingham or Detroit. I would say Birmingham because it's very cheap to put on football games in Birmingham and very expensive to put them on in Detroit. And Repole is looking at those numbers very intently. Memphis and Houston, I believe, even if you brought them back right now, because last year was so horrible for both of those franchises, and Repole has pointed out how horrible it was, I don't think that you could recover the fan bases in this season. So there's I think zero chance that either one of those teams will be back. Louisville and Orlando, they could make it in. I don't think it's likely though, and the reason why is the math that you see under here. If you're just working with those 6 teams and you're just looking at their predicted attendance, and I worked out attendance based kind of on what they did this year. However, figuring in the amount of bad will that the Repole plan has created in the circles of spring football fans. So I'm assuming that everyone's going to have an off turnout year. The only way you could really get around that is if you invested a bunch of money into promotion, which I don't think Repole's going to do. So, you're going to see attendance drop. Now, I think I put some pretty reasonable estimations on Louisville and Orlando. I think Louisville will support a team, but I think the stadium they'll be playing in is going to be too small. Orlando, on the other hand, is not the best fan support city, just to be totally honest about that. I think they would draw probably about 8,000, something like that per game. Now Boise could draw a bunch more, but like I said, I don't think Boise's destined to happen. So the question to him becomes, do I run with 6 teams, or do I run with 8 teams and spend more money to actually have a lower attendance? I don't think he's going to choose that option. Is this kind of 6-team UFL going to be perceived as a lesser version of the league than the 8-team 2025 UFL? I think there's a great chance that fans will see it that way, and that really doesn't bode well for Repole. Mike Repole is probably not the savior of spring football. In fact, he might be its next super rich guy cautionary tale. I am not 100% convinced the UFL isn't out of time and won't be forced to roll out 6 teams next year due to his mismanagement so far. If that occurs, it might just be it for this league, with the attendance collapsing league-wide. He is on an extremely tight schedule for this kind of reboot. Honestly, I think that 6 teams in 2026 is probably more likely than 8. It is obviously far quicker to shutter a team than to properly build one from scratch. It's far easier to get an optimal day one turnout in a new market if you have 18 months to prepare rather than 6 months or less. And I don't think any UFL fan will consider a 6-team UFL an improvement over the 2025's 8-team league. I have, in this time, outed Repole as the architect of the plan to kill the USFL teams, and I've been very critical of his plan to replace them. People don't like just a critic, so I'm going to present an alternative plan, a quick fix for 2026, using his own framework of wanting 8 solid franchises and smaller stadiums to broadcast from. Am I saying my plan is the only good plan? Absolutely not. I'm saying that Repole needs a new plan, and the one that I wrote with his desires in mind is one of the few really workable ones. If he adjusts, if he listens, if he drops the arrogance pouring out downward towards the fans, there's still time to turn this PR train wreck around. He and his partners have the money they need to succeed despite the time crunch. Fox and ESPN have the platforms. Now all they need is a plan that could actually work. So what does that entail? Please tune in for part 2 of this series. If you've enjoyed what I had to say today, please like me and give me a thumbs up. And that will make the great YouTube machine put me in front of more people. If you really like what I have to say, subscribe and you'll see updates each time I make more. You guys have a great day.